This is You, the People. Each week, we three Canadians talk about you, the people, your politics, your political system, your cartoon-like political characters, and yes, your ongoing election. And with me, as always, Corey Hogan, Stephen Carter. Guys, what is going on?
I don't know, Zain. Is it November 3rd? Is it November 30th? Is it November 300th? I've lost track of days. I'm sick of it all. I'm ready for this election to be over. I think Trump can just be president. I'm over it.
Yeah,
I don't even care anymore.
I think that is his ultimate strategy. And you know what? He's effectively told people at broad daylight that's what it's going to be. Just wear them down. If I can wear you down for 4 years, why not a little bit longer? Stephen Carter, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. It's just really weird because I'd predicted this would be over by now. So I'm a little bit...
Okay, well, there's a lot of stock of that. Well, thank you.
I'm a little bit surprised.
Thank you for this fucking extended nightmare that you're making us live through.
Back and listen to my predictions. I'm like, it'll be all over early.
Yeah, well, thank you.
It is over. They just
called Arizona, just so you know.
Yeah, 306. No, 307. Yeah, 306. Damn, my name on the thing is wrong.
I'm just looking. When you combine the legal and illegal votes, Joe Biden wins Arizona. So they just call that right now for Joe Biden.
Technically true, Zain. Technically true.
You combine both the votes. Corey, do we have to talk about basketball before we move on? Because it is coming back in December.
It is coming back really soon.
And Toronto's looking for a home. This is something I wanted to talk to you about, and I haven't had the chance to do it in any other form, so why not now? Where should the Toronto Raptors play in 2020, 2021? Like, they've got cities bidding for their presence.
I actually don't know. I haven't been following enough who's in the hunt right now.
Okay, so I think it's Nashville. It's somewhere in New Jersey, which is just the best description of New Jersey.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, totally perfect. Yeah.
So far, we're 2 for 2 for great locations. Keep going.
Louisville, I think, is in the mix. They've put their hand up, proverbially. And I don't know who else is in the mix. I thought Austin was, but I think that they don't have the infrastructure. But it seems like Nashville and somewhere in New Jersey is pretty much where it stands right now.
Well, Louisville is where the sequel to Dave, Elizabethtown, was based. So I think that would be my vote, just given my movie proclivities. But somewhere in New Jersey sounds pretty cool.
Yeah. No, Carter,
it really ties into Toronto. I mean, it's perfect. Toronto is like any place in New Jersey. So
they have the same energy. No, they have the same energy for sure. That's not even a joke. The Garden State, this idea, it's quite urban, and yet all of a sudden you're out in the middle of nowhere.
Perfect.
I feel it. I think it's good.
Yeah. No, they and as we know, in the original Dave, he coaches the Toronto Raptors, and he wins Coach of the Year on the same day he gets fired. So just so you know, that is Dave.
That was the draft before they decided he should work at like a job placement. They thought it made a little more sense for his character. But
this is true. This is true. I wish we could write Dave. We have had no influence over writing the characters in Dave, but there we are.
Dave 2. I think we're ready for Dave 2.
Totally.
It's going to be him in Canada at a Swiss chalet thinking about his moment of glory as U.S. president and contemplating a comeback. And then he becomes Canadian Prime Minister. What do you guys think? Let's option this.
Any idiot can become Canadian Prime Minister.
Another Stephen Carter prediction. Thank you. Thank you for that, Stephen. You make predictions even though when you don't even know you are. Should we move into the headlines?
Let's do that.
Let's do it.
Let's go into the headlines. Guys, let's start with the Washington Post, a headline coming to us hot off the press yesterday. Mississippi Republican calls for his state to secede from the union after Biden victory. Instead of being governed by President Joe Biden, State Rep Price Wallace said on Twitter that Mississippi should secede from the rest of the United States and form its own country. Corey, I know for the longest time you have been a big advocate for Mississippi forming its own country, the landlocked state, to start its own nation. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's not actually landlocked. It's right there on the Gulf, but I am still pretty excited about the notion. Phil Oakes sold me on it in the 70s, and so I've been on board all this time. I think Mississippi should find itself another country to be part of. I'm okay with that. I think most of America should be okay with that.
Didn't they try that once?
Yeah, it didn't go so well that time.
No, I'm just saying. I mean, for some reason, they fought to keep him in, which seems odd to me. I'd be like, see ya. I think that's
I'm not even being fair. Like, he's one idiot in Mississippi. He does not have the support of the people who have elected him on this matter. I am quite sure, and he can't spell. So he's a real triple threat.
Well, I mean, one idiot in Mississippi is the Stephen Carter story. Technically, Corey, I would say it's pretty landlocked. It's like got a little bit of a inlet situation going on that touches some water. I don't know. It's not even a quarter. I think landlocked, you at least need a quarter to be defined as anti-landlocked. But I just wanted to make that clear.
I'm a little concerned you've confused Mississippi with Mississauga again. That whole drama.
Let's move on to our next headline. This one comes to us from The Verge. 4 Seasons Total Landscaping becomes a VR chat hangout for furries. Now, Corey, I'm going to go back to you again. Usually I should go to Steven for this. But the saga, the story, the legend of 4 Seasons Total Landscaping, which, by the way, is now solidifying itself in not just our political but cultural zeitgeist, continues. This was one of several articles I could have chosen from. There was also an oral history of 4 Seasons Total Landscaping. But this is hilarious. The massively multiplayer online VR simulator that lets you create an avatar of your choosing has now chosen 4 Seasons Total Landscaping as one of the most popular hangouts on its platform. Corey, take it away from any angle you have with the best story of the year.
It's the best story of the year. The fact that it has now been immortalized, this was one of my concerns, that 4 Seasons Total Landscaping would become such a big deal. They would clean up that shit yard. They would slap some paint on it. They would fix the hose that's in the background of their lectern. And it would lose a lot of the magic. But now that it's been kind of...
Yeah.
It's been immortalized. It's now online. We can go to this almost like it's a digital museum and always enjoy that moment when Rudy Giuliani brought out a sex offender to talk about how he wasn't allowed to be close enough to people.
While Joe Biden was being announced as the next president of the United States.
Oh, that's good.
Carter, you are a fan of poor advanced work as well as furries. Any thoughts?
Oh, I mean, it's really it's really my best possible scenario. I mean, why just furries though? That's my bigger question. Why not, the broader collection of the kink community? They can't all just be on kink talk.
No, you're not. It's not necessarily a kink thing to be a furry there, Carter. Show some understanding of internet subcultures, would you?
Oh no, it's a kink.
I mean, why don't you come inside from outdoors now and then and actually try to learn something about the real world?
You're right. I should spend more time on the porn bots and the furry bots and all the.
You're showing your ignorance here.
Yeah,
I'm really pleased to be.
Open up your mind, Carter. Carter, I'm going to you next for our next headline. This one comes to us from the New York Times. Steve Bannon's lawyer quits after Bannon calls Dr. Fauci to be beheaded. I don't even know if I should laugh, but I can't not laugh. This is what I meant by their colorful political characters that just keep giving. Carter, any thoughts? I know you've had to deal with former campaign strategists who've asked for public health officials to be beheaded. So please pull from your experience to talk about this.
I mean, from my experience, these people are nuts. They're absolute nuts. And normally, in a normal situation, they would just be screaming on corners with no one paying attention. But it's I think that behind all of this is still the argument about what's going on with Facebook, what's going on with Twitter, what's going on with YouTube, because, all these crazy people, are still being allowed to have these platforms. Steve Bannon was kicked off for a little bit, but only his videos have been taken off. Like he's getting back in, like, and all of this stuff just makes me crazy. It's making me crazy.
Corey, this is, of course, the same Steve Bannon that was the architect of Donald Trump's 2016 campaign and the architect of taking a lot of money and building no wall. Any thoughts on this Steve Bannon and his lawyer?
Also the architect of wearing multiple collared shirts at any given time.
This is true.
In a real thick, layered look. You know what? I mean, he's just one of the... This is a guy who not too long ago was arrested by the Postal Service on a boat, and now his lawyer is quitting because he wants to behead other officials. there are people who argue there's no such thing as bad publicity. I'm pretty certain we found the perfect counter example to this here.
Yeah.
This guy is not, this guy is losing 2020, and it takes some pretty legendary prowess to lose 2020.
I don't know. Do you think he's not making some money somewhere? Like,
he's a spokesperson
he
for
had
something.
a boat. I don't have a boat. Do you have a boat?
Well, I'll tell you this, Carter. He's paying less in legal fees now, so I'm calling that a win.
Yeah, I mean, he's probably going to get a spokesperson gig somewhere. Like, he's got the look for, I don't know, like what Mark's Work Warehouse used to be. Another.
Isn't Rudy Giuliani already doing that? Like, isn't he already got the spokesperson stuff for? Like, Rudy Giuliani's already got the market.
Yeah, he's doing cigars. He's selling cigars on YouTube.
So, I mean,
he's also doing these Untuck It shirts, which, by the way, could have been really helpful for him if he had that sponsorship a little while ago. All right, let me go to the last headline. This one from Newsweek. Not Nazi enough. Proud Boys infighting sees leading member break away from group to fight white genocide. Dangerous, crazy story. Corey, Carter, either one of you want to jump in on this one?
Yeah, I mean, yikes. I did see that apparently this was somebody who was tired of pretending that he wasn't a Nazi. We have hit that stage where people are not even pretending. And you do hit this stage when you look at authoritarian increases in different nations where it's like disruption, right? Disruption always starts at the start by saying, no, I'm actually just one of you. And I just want to do it a little bit differently. And at a certain point, you just take off the cloak and you say, no, actually, I want to do things entirely different. And the fact that we've hit the point in the United States, and it's not unique, Christ. I mean, let's not suffer from recency bias. The 60s, David Duke in the 80s. I mean, there's been a lot of shitty people who have been pretty overt about their views, but it's still alarming that we are now seeing people take that next step and say, you know what, I feel comfortable in this environment saying that I am a Nazi.
Carter?
Well, it actually heartens me. It gives me a degree of comfort that which will stand between the white supremacists actually organizing and actually having real impact is basic human pettiness. So them being petty with each other and not feeling like they can be part of a group is actually not a bad thing, because it does keep these white supremacist groups relatively small, and it keeps them from linking together because they're actually in competition with one another. So it's actually not all that bad that they're doing this crazy stuff, but of course they're lunatics. And I think that if they were to come together and not piss each other off, we'd be really facing a much more difficult challenge.
Do you think they deserve the press that they're getting for these, like this was a Newsweek piece I'm reading you. Do you feel like this is something that this kind of being, I don't know, propagated, catalyzed in some ways by giving them the spotlight? It's
Newsweek. No one's reading it. Right. So it's not a big deal. I mean, Newsweek used to be, a pretty big deal, but now it's all but dead.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of disruptions, Newsweek's peak was in the 90s, and it was owned by the Daily Beast until the Daily Beast decided it wasn't an adequate purchase anymore. Like, let's be real about their currency. But I mean, this is a good question. There's fundamentally two schools of thought on this and a lot of flavors in between. But is this something we need to be talking about because it's deeply alarming and needs to be addressed head on? Or is the talking about it giving it oxygen that's feeding this problem and fanning the flames?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I would argue that it's better to be talking about it than ignoring it as it's growing. But I think it does fan the flames, and we do not have an antidote for it. I thought that we were seeing an antidote, and it turns out, 72 million people thought that the antidote was, or thought that the continued white supremacy wasn't a bad thing to belong to. So I'm a little bit frustrated that it continues to grow, but I think we have to keep talking about it. I think that it's worse to ignore it.
We're gonna discuss that at a future episode. I want to kind of deep dive on kind of media coverage, and especially as related to some of these fractured, small but highly dangerous groups. But let's move it on to our first segment. You can't get rid of these fucking people. Guys, there are so many Republican characters this week that have come out and made their presence known and renowned. I want to talk about a few of them. We got Bill Barr, we got Mike Pompeo, we got Mitch McConnell, and of course we've got the legend himself, Donald Trump. So many things to talk about. Let's start here, though. And let's start with something that's a continuation of a thread that's been opened on this show quite a few times, which is Trump's emails. And I don't mean Clinton's emails, I mean Trump's fundraising emails. And this time it's about this election defense fund. You guys have seen these emails that have been coming out, Corey. I know you're still perhaps subscribed to them. But the revelation and the investigation that's gone on this week is that the majority of the money donated, if not all of it, underneath the threshold of $8,000 goes directly to the president and a special PAC. It does not actually go to defending, this election or trying to stop stealing it, i.e. legal fees. There is going to be a world of hurt for Donald Trump. But let's start here. How big of a deal do you think this is in terms of what the ramifications this could mean for Trump and his campaign on the back end of this insanity? Corey.
Well, I mean, I think that Trump is showing that he's broke, and he's doing what he's always done when he's broke, and he's reaching out and becoming more of a grifter. That's nothing but bad news for democracy. I'm not one of those people that believes that all big money in democracy is evil. I think that money is just one, forgive me for this, but one currency of politics. It is important to have enough money to do politics. But Trump's a grifter. Trump's a fraud. So even the way that they've constructed their emails is unique in that the desperation, the threatening, right? We've noticed that you haven't given us any money, you little fucker. Give us your money. All of that is part of the con that Donald Trump has done. The 1,000% match. I mean, right now, 1,000% match seems to be consistent in the ads or in the emails. None of that seems to be coming true. There are no 1,000% match donors. This is all just part of the con. And that's Donald Trump. That's who he is in a nutshell. And I hope that he has the same size of debt that forced him to close his sell his Atlantic City casinos.
And Corey, is this more problematic than the emails that he was sending before the campaign in your mind? Do you feel like this is on the same plane, or do you feel like this could be something even more dangerous for Trump and his campaign?
Yeah, I've been wondering this myself. So first of all, let me just say I have tried to unsubscribe from this email list 3 times, and they keep sending me all of the emails still.
Oh, you're kidding.
No, I'm serious. It's basically impossible to get away from this man at this point, which is how I think a lot of the nation feels. But they are running these lists straight into the ground and
burning them.
Yeah, they're burning them at this point. It does tell me that they they're going to soak every last bit of value out of these email lists on the way out the door. And one of the things that the money is not going to a legal defense fund. A lot of the money is going to a Donald Trump PAC that can be spent outside of basically any kind of, regulatory, not entirely outside of a regulatory framework, but certainly with far fewer restrictions. And by the way, that PAC cannot actually spend money on the legal defense. Like, you were giving to a legal defense, and most of the money is legally not allowed to be spent on that legal defense. It's Carter said it right. It's grift, and the grift never ends with these guys. And these 1,000% matches, it's absurd. They seem to have just settled on 1,000%, by the way, in all of the emails that I cannot get rid of. And it's just, we won this state. The Democrats are trying to steal this state. Look at all of this examples of malfeasance we found. I would say his emails are actually a little bit more measured than he is on Twitter. Not a lot more measured, but a little bit more. It basically accuses things of handing out collateral in polling stations, which is not, it's against the rules, but it's not, let's overturn an election levels of against the rules.
Sure.
Whereas he on Twitter is saying things like the entire election's been stolen thanks to voting systems. Look at One American News Network and what they're saying. So, it's just kind of sad, I guess, is what I would say, though. It actually, so I don't know if it's more alarming or less alarming in the sense that it seems more pathetic, and so in that way less scary. But the language if you just sort of step back, or if you weren't kind of made numb by the last 4 years of Donald Trump, or even the last 4 weeks of Donald Trump's emails, you would say, this is really alarming, right? I mean, he's talking about fighting back and taking to the streets and all sorts of nonsense. So I don't know. I think I think this is kind of the Donald Trump disease. It becomes impossible to measure what is actually still alarming because he alarms us so much. We stop caring. We stop noticing.
And part of that, Corey, is like, I think as you mentioned, this is maybe a strategy. I hate to put strategy and Donald Trump in the same sentence, of continuing the election so you can keep raising more money, right? Like we've talked about never ending elections, but like if you actually quite literally never end this election, you can continue to kind of, mooch off your supporters.
Well, sure. This guy has made it pretty clear he's not going anywhere. There's starting to be stories that he's looking to run for the nomination in 2024. Right. and he's happy to be part of the discourse still. Almost every other former American president just slinks into the background, hangs out against the wall, it looks like the wallpaper. But Donald Trump's made it really clear he's going to continue to be an actor and a voice in U.S. politics as long as he's allowed to be.
Carter, there's also this other narrative, which is Donald Trump has indicated to close allies that he may be running in 2024. Of course, he's simultaneously saying he won this election. So now he is saying he is both going to be winning this election and running for a third term in 2024. Square that for me, political strategist Stephen Carter.
Yeah, I mean, we're not looking for logic to be at the height of Trumpism, right? Like, he's never been constrained by logic. He's not going to be constrained by logic now. Having said that, you're starting to see little tiny signals. Melania has indicated this will be their last Christmas decorating the White House.
Well, now, to be fair, she might just be leaving his ass.
Could be.
And she also hated decorating for Christmas, as you know from those leaked audio tapes. She was really pissed off.
I can't believe that she's even doing it this time. What's the point?
Carter, your point is we're just poking holes in it, like right away. Keep going.
I'm not saying it's a strong indication. I'm not saying it's the strongest indication. What would be stronger is a concession from the president. But I don't think, part of my brain is he can't afford to say he's not, that he's lost. And the afford it can be measured in a couple of different ways. The incessant, we need more money, is indicating that they have spent too much money and that they are in debt. So that debt needs to be cleared. Then there is the threat of prosecution, the threat of, the 6 big lawsuits that are outstanding against him, the prosecution that, has been rumored or that could occur, as a result of his behavior as president. I'm sure that he's aware of that, and he's aware that right now he's got a pretty decent shield and that he's able to walk away or ignore or delay everything that is proceeding against him. And that ends on January the 20th when he walks out of the White House for the last time. So I think that he's a cornered dog, and a cornered dog without much ferocity, but nonetheless that does not remove the anger and fear that I'm sure that he's experiencing.
Corey, is he a cornered dog? Is he struggling to grasp reality? Is this just a elaborate legal defense of dragging your heels so you don't get prosecuted? What do you think's going on here?
Well, maybe all of the above. And on the legal defense side, we would be falling into a trap to think too binary. He's president, he's not president. It will be very difficult for the Justice Department to go after him, the state of New York to go after him, if he's a declared political candidate for the next election, because then it will still look political. And by the way, if you're Deutsche Bank and you're all of a sudden not renewing these loans and he's a declared political candidate for 2024 with massive amounts of support, you're probably sweating bullets. You're thinking, oh my God, what am I going to be getting myself into? I'm going to be fighting with half of the U.S. Political system. So in many ways, I think that he sees running in 2024, even if he doesn't actually intend to run in 2024, but he sees declaring that he's going to run in 2024, doing it early, as the next best thing. It continues to make him really hard to touch, not untouchable as he was as president, but all of a sudden it adds this layer that makes him hard to bring to justice, hard to bring to account, because everything will all of a sudden be, well, everything will continue to be looked at through that political lens. And he can make the argument, this is a political prosecution. They are just not giving me the money because of politics. And that may help him. That may help him avoid consequences for his actions.
That's interesting to talk about the off-ramp of Trump. It's interesting. We kind of talk about the pathetic nature of it. We're kind of getting a little bit more serious as it now relates to maybe the strategy of declaring into 2024. Let's maybe double down on serious, Carter, and let's talk about what's actually going on. Because I know I like to laugh at Trump and some of these characters, but there is a very interesting number I'd like to share with you. And you may have seen it, which was a poll. Now, we know the issue with polls in this election, but let's take this for what it's worth, suggesting that only 3% of Americans think Trump won the election, but 86% of Trump voters think Biden didn't legitimately win. You have that compounded with Pompeo saying we're going to have a fantastic transition to a second Trump administration. You have Bill Barr okaying a justice investigation into fraud. We're playing with some dangerous, flammable material. We talked about we didn't see violence on election night. I'm not suggesting that this is the ingredients for it, but talk to me about the triangulation of some of the flammable material we're now seeing post-election from maybe not Trump himself, but Team Trump.
Let's start with Pompeo. It wasn't a joke, right? It was not a joke. He was saying something that he thought that he needed to say, either to please the boss or to please the electorate. So he said those things because he wants something out of it. It wasn't a joke. I know because jokes have laughter after them, unless you're Corey Hogan. And then the joke falls flat.
Did you expect him to laugh at his own joke? Is that what you're suggesting? Because Corey doesn't laugh at his own jokes. We laugh. I laugh at his jokes.
I know we can rewind about 6 minutes because he was pissing himself at his own joke.
Can we rewind 30 seconds to when you made that joke and neither of us reacted?
No, but the audience laughed. The audience laughed. That's all that mattered.
Yeah, that's good.
Let's move forward. And Bill Barr, let's talk about him. I mean, basically, when you read what he's authorized...
Well done, Corey. Okay, go ahead, Carter. Sorry.
You bastards. Well, when you read what he's authorized the investigations into reasonable concerns about voter fraud. I mean, he's authorized the government to do what the government should do. Now, it was purely political. It was done in such a fashion that it generated, of course, the headlines. It did what it was supposed to do. It wasn't actually about finding voter fraud. It was about putting up a flag and sending a signal. And that's why the head of elections fraud quit, because it wasn't actually about voter fraud. It was about sending the signal to voters that this election may have been stolen. All of these things are contributing to the 86% of Republicans who believe that Biden maybe not have won fair and square. This is the undermining of democracy that is the most dangerous. If you do not have confidence in your elections, then you will stop participating in your elections and you will not stop advocating for change, right? You will continue to hold the beliefs that you have, but instead of advocating for change through the electoral system, through the proper system, you will begin advocating for change in a dangerous and potentially violent way. And so they're playing with fire, but they don't give a shit. Bill Barr certainly doesn't give a shit. He's turned out to be the biggest toad in the cabinet, and there's a lot of toads in there. So being the biggest one must be pretty impressive. So I'm a little bit frustrated by it because I don't know why they're doing it. There is no upside for Bill Barr after January the 20th, unless he believes that something could happen. But they're, what's the game that they're playing at? This is the thing that I've been trying to figure out. What's the game that they're playing at? There's only two potential outcomes. He stays or he goes. Do they really think that they can overturn or stop the machinery of this election? States are already certifying their results. They will all be certified by December the 2nd or 3rd or whatever the date is. The election's over. Biden won. There is no gain for that. So what are they playing at? And it's a game I don't quite understand. And I'm interested to maybe Corey's figured it out. Maybe he has.
Corey, I'll ask Carter's question to you. Whether it's Pompeo, whether it's Barr, let me add a third gentleman to the mix, Mitch McConnell, right? Maybe not as egregious in terms of what he's saying explicitly, but what he's not saying. So what do you think the game is? That plus knowing that a large portion of the Trump base doesn't think Joe Biden was elected legitimately. What sort of game do you think they're trying to play here?
I think they're playing a few games at once, and they're trying to keep their options open, and they're trying to make sure that their paths forward have the most optimal outcomes. And in particular, there's a few things that, depending on which of those characters you are, you might have a different priority here. Donald Trump is probably still looking for faint hope in the election, and some of the people around him probably the same. And the way to do that at this point, it's pretty clear, will not be through the courts, at least not with their current really weak legal strategy of challenging 500 votes in a state, where somebody wins by 10,000 or whatever the specific numbers are. But they're not even challenging enough things to change the election. So even if they were somehow successful in the short term, it wouldn't change the math whatsoever. They seem to instead be focusing on a strategy of creating such ambiguity about the results that they allow almost an escape hatch approach. And I was tweeting a bit about this today. But if you are the state of Pennsylvania, if you're the state of Georgia, if you're the state of Arizona, hell, if you're Michigan or I think Wisconsin, both have Republican legislatures as well right now, you have a power that has not been seized by a state legislature ever, but is in the Constitution. And that's to determine how your electors, well, not ever, because they didn't used to vote. But you can essentially say, I'm going to determine that these electors are distributed in a different way. Now, there's a ton of legal arguments about whether you can actually do that or not. There's this whole Electoral Count Act from the 19th century that is impossible to read, and people argue about what it means. But if you have a faint hope as Trump, it still hinges on a legal strategy. But if you have a faint hope, it's that you create such uncertainty about whether these elections are run fairly that you've given the political cover to these legislatures. You only need a few to say, you know what? This is such a corrupted election. We can't assign electoral votes to either of these people. So we're going to send a slate of 16 people, 20 people to abstain. We're just going to abstain, right? And that might even sound reasonable. Might not even be allowed. Like the courts will have to weigh in. But if you end up in a situation like that, you rob Joe Biden the ability, because you have changed the numerator and denominator, of getting 50% of the electoral votes, which throws it to the House, which means essentially Donald Trump can be president. It's all crazy. It's all legally dubious. It would require the Supreme Court essentially to say, yeah, it's okay, legislators, for you to walk all over due process and just override the laws that were in your state. But when we talk about Donald Trump needing the Supreme Court, it was never to get 500 votes in Michigan. Right? It was for these big throws, these crazy throws to answer these ambiguous questions based on legislation from the 19th century or before. And so that seems to be what Donald Trump is playing at right now, or at least some of the people around them, at least opening up this legislative strategy. I think it's doomed to fail. I think it's the faintest of faint hopes, but it makes me very nervous.
Carter, go ahead, Corey. Please keep going.
I'll be much faster on the others. If you're Mitch McConnell, it's simpler. You want the Senate. You want to get Georgia, and you don't want to discourage your base, and you want to keep the fight in everybody. And if you are the next layer out of Republican, you want Donald Trump supporters. You want this base that has delivered the nation in 2016 and almost delivered the nation in 2020.
Corey, I was going to go to Carter, but let me pick up on this. Talk about risk. Political risk for McConnell, minimal, considering he has this control in this position. Political risk for Trump and others. Where do you kind of rank their risk profile on some of these moves?
As long as he's not on a limb, his risk is rather modest. And McConnell didn't speak the first day or the second day. He was finally cornered by a microphone on the third day, and he said Donald Trump has a right to contest this election, which has become like the Republican weaselly answer to not condemn a president for trying to run a coup against the American people. But his risk is pretty minimal as long as every other Republican is saying the same thing. And even though the New York Times is starting to document the cracks, the Ohio governor today said, yeah, I think Joe Biden is the president-elect. Let's be real. The vast majority of Republicans are continuing to hold the line on this right now. So McConnell's risk is low as long as he's not out on a limb. And for that reason, he'll probably continue until he starts seeing the pressure move a different way.
Carter, Republicans are known for, quote unquote, using the Carville term, getting in line. If they seem to be doing so on this issue as well. Let's talk about political risk for McConnell and perhaps for Barr and Pompeo on either it be political risk or legacy risk. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Even if we don't know what game exactly they're playing, Corey has a hypothesis. We can perhaps calculate the risk in a binary situation like this.
Well, the risk doesn't appear to be that high because we calculated the risk, incorrectly prior to the election, right? Because Donald Trump was the worst president in American history and got the second most number of votes in American history. So that risk was obviously calculated incorrectly. So if you're McConnell and you've watched this party become what it is today, he doesn't care what it is. All he cares is that he's atop it. And he is atop it. He's got the most power of any Republican official. He doesn't care. As long as he doesn't lose the 2 Georgia seats, then really whatever Donald Trump does is fine by him. And frankly, it would appear, if I was doing the math in McConnell's office, it would appear that the biggest risk would be, divorcing yourself from the Donald Trump acolytes, the voters who love Donald Trump. Georgia is razor thin for Biden. The people who did vote for Trump were voting for Trump. And there is no indication that if you were to walk away from Trump or walk away from Trumpism, the phrase that Corey hates so much, that those voters would stay with the Republican Party. So in McConnell's mind, I think he thinks that it is smart to at least in the short term, stay with Trump and signal his support, regardless of how much it costs him in terms of his personal dignity. I think that's long gone. He doesn't give a shit about that.
Corey, let's wrap this up with Team Biden. They're positioning all of this as a comedy of errors, so to speak, saying they're just going to power through like they would as if Donald Trump had conceded. Joe Biden's laughed off a few of these examples when he's seen them. Right approach, wrong approach in your mind?
I think it's the right approach for him. And a lot of his team is not laughing, and that's also the right approach. But, his direct communication to Democrats, his direct, even his campaign communications, it's all based on the idea that he is the president-elect. When he stands there at a lectern, behind him is, the seal of a stylized version of the seal of the President of the United States with the number 46 and, office of the president-elect. He's decided he's going to show as though he's got the job. It's something I think that Americans are not used to seeing, 2 people both claiming that they have a certain office like this. And it's a little alarming, I think, for those of us outside of the United States saying, we've seen this in other countries. People both claiming the same thing doesn't often lead to good situations. But, I guess the thing is, he needs to do this because he ultimately needs to build and build and build this sense that he is the president and that he is the legitimate president, because it will be impossible to do his job otherwise come January 20th, January 21st, when the rubber hits the road. And look, I mean, it's not a shocking revelation that the U.S. system is norm-based. Conventions are needed to make it work. The U.S. Constitution was written in the 1780s. It's only 4,500 words long. You look at a founding document like for the European Union, it's tens of thousands of words. The U.S. Constitution with amendments is only about 7,600. It doesn't deal with every situation. The legislation underneath it has been written over hundreds of years. We forget how old of a democracy the United States is. And some of that legislation is downright bad. Some of it's actively ignored. Like the U.S. code says electors are appointed on election day. They're not, they don't do it for weeks after, but arguably, that is actually what the law of the United States says. And I guess this is my point. The system only works if everybody agrees to try to make it work. And if Joe Biden shows up on January 20th and he's been having a fucking fist fight with Donald Trump and the Republicans that entire time, he is going to get nothing done. If there is this sour, bitter sense that Joe Biden stole this election, I don't even know if he'll get a cabinet appointed. Why would you, as a Republican Senate, confirm the cabinet of somebody you believe stole an election? Yeah, maybe you get the Mitt Romneys of the world, the Susan Collins for the senior positions, but those other 1,200 that you've got to fill, the hell are you going to do in that situation? So he needs to make nice, and that's what he's trying to do, and he's trying not to fight with everybody because that is the only way forward for him right now.
Carter, Biden's strategy. Corey laid out his justification. Biden's playing this right. His team's also playing this right. Do you concur?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that business as usual, as normal as possible, is the call of the day. You certainly don't want to fall into the trap of pushing back every time Donald Trump tweets something insane. I mean, you know, he's been putting up Twitter streams that just make your head explode. So just ignore it. Show the world what a president's supposed to look like, how a president's supposed to behave. And that's what Biden's doing. There's not another election for Biden. I mean, sure, there's the Georgia special elections, but Biden's the president. So from his point of view, he needs to do the transition as best possible. And if it means that he can only appoint his first cabinet for 240 days, which is the limit under the Vacancies Act without having the Senate confirm them, well then, you know what? They each get 2/3 of a year of a job, and then they move on to the next guys.
Yeah, but you only get that if the Senate's not sitting.
Well, no, because right now Trump's got people in there who are acting. That's not right. They get 240 days.
Yeah, you might be right.
I think I am. This time. Just this time, Corey.
We'll do corrections. We never do
corrections. We just move forward. We just move forward and pretend we never made a mistake.
And that is what we're doing as we move on to our next section, or our next segment, I should say. You have no clue and you have no idea. Guys, I want to talk about the mini civil war happening within the Democratic Party right now. There was a leak of a conference call from the Democratic caucus talking about the future of the House. You had AOC Rashida Tlaib going after the moderates. You had the moderates, Hakeem Jeffries and others going after the Social Democrats, or the more progressive wing of the party. We teased this last time, but I want to start with you, Stephen. Talk to me about civil wars in political parties. Is this common? Is this not common? And why do you think these wars kind of happen, especially when you win so quickly after elections? Is it about staking ground, or what do you kind of make of? Let's start general and then get specific to this particular instance of civil wars within political parties.
Everybody was really good during the election. Everybody stayed where they needed to stay. They said what they needed to say. They did what needed to be done in order to get Joe Biden elected. Now everybody's coming back and saying, with their hand out and saying, and I want mine. So if you're a moderate, you're saying, you know, look, we got this moderate elected. We have to follow the moderate path. And if you're a little bit further to the left, you're coming to front and saying, you know what, the progressives demand to be paid. We demand to be paid our, you know, Medicare for all, or we demand to be paid by, you know, we did our job. We stood by the side here, and we now want that which is due. That's what politics is, you know, and we hide it a little bit more in the parliamentary system, because there's so much power in the prime minister's office. We have the whip, and we have a little bit more control. I mean, there's a whip in the United States as well, but the whip's a little bit different. You know, getting kicked out of the Democratic Party isn't the job of the whip. It's not going to happen. So you have factions, you have smaller caucuses that have always been a part of politics. Those smaller caucuses are perfectly capable of moving back and forth between ideas and supporting something from a Republican president or from a Democratic president. That's what makes the system work in the United States. I don't think it's a problem right now to have a little bit of a civil war ongoing from the Democrats. The Democrats need to figure out what the general population wants, because it appears that the Democratic positioning didn't work for the Senate. It didn't work as well as it needed to in the House. So having a little bit of a war when there's not an election, I'm all for it. Go for it.
Corey's now the time. Should they be airing out their quote unquote dirty laundry or the future trajectory of their party in such a public manner?
Not for the next 2 months or so. Let's actually see Joe Biden as president. Let's see the Georgia Senate election behind them before they start getting a real fist fight about things. And you know, frankly, I don't think it's a very good idea in the first, let's say, 100 days of the Biden presidency. They got to get some stuff done, and they've got to get it done for the American people. And if they start focusing inwardly, I think that's That would be a mistake. Any party that is focused on themselves at a time when there's a real, real things going on and there's a real opportunity to make or stop work is a bit crazy. So like neither the Republicans nor the Democrats should do any soul searching at this moment. They should remind themselves that they're at a moment of maximum action, and they both need to have their game faces on.
Carter, what do you make of that? Do you feel like do you buy Corey's argument that there needs to be a moratorium for a couple of months?
Well, I mean, a little bit surprised to hear Corey going Deadpool in his, suggestions for how the Democrats should be managing things. I mean, I think the only thing that's at stake right now is Georgia. And, there's an argument about how to win the election. That's a normal thing. Like, I think the fact that everybody stayed on board to this point is a minor miracle. Like normally they'd be fighting in the midst of the election. So keeping everybody on board. I mean, it's not like the Republicans didn't go through this on their own. I mean, arguably the weakest side lost or won, but what are you going to do? Like, well, Carter, I think this is fine.
Corey, tell me, why is it a myth that Republicans have a better tendency to get in line and that Democrats or more progressives like to eat their young and really like to fracture and subdivide? We hear that often, but in your experience, is that a myth? Do you feel like that's bears out in the evidence?
I mean, it's baked into the philosophy. I don't want to draw too broad of conclusions here, and certainly there are exceptions, but the reality is, one party is known for law and order and the other is known for embracing diversity. Like that is naturally going to lead to command and control on one side and a lot of different viewpoints that are not always in accord on the other. And that's, that's not a shocking thing to say. I don't even think it's a controversial thing to say. It's like the old Will Rogers joke, I'm not a member of an organized political party. I'm a Democrat. That kind of inability to get in line is pretty foundational to the democratic worldview, bluntly. So, but sometimes you've just got to be able to check it. Like all of these, there's a natural pull to a lot of things in life, but it doesn't mean that it becomes an inevitability. And the Democrats need to sort of think about whether they want to be having these conversations at this moment or whether they want to kind of park it for a bit.
That's a great line, that Will Rogers line. I know that when Dave was running, he wanted to put that on his billboards, and of course, too long. They didn't make billboards that long. Carter, you were pulling your non-existent hair. Do you want to throw in?
Well, I want to call up Speaker Boehner and ask him about factions within the Republican Party and how he fared when the faction of the Tea Party became strong enough to oust him and put in Speaker Paul Ryan. Like this, the truth of the matter is factions happen in all parties. There's remarkable discipline in the Senate right now. And I think that Nancy Pelosi was able to hold things together in the run up to the election. But you can't hold groups together that are that different. And when you only have a two-party system, there are going to be all kinds of people, especially across a geography and a population the size of the United States of America. They don't all share the same ideals. That's okay, provided it doesn't stop you from getting elected.
Last segment I talked about three men. I talked about Pompeo, Barr, McConnell. Let's talk about three women that I want to focus on in this section in the Democratic leadership in different ways. Let's talk about Nancy Pelosi, AOC, and then finally Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. So let's start with Nancy Pelosi. She's kind of stayed above the fray on this, but she has the risk, Corey, that she gets squeezed because she's the establishment. So you have the moderate wing and the progressive wing both kind of pointing fingers at each other, but also pointing fingers at saying, who actually screwed us was the establishment here. They just didn't do things correctly. How do you kind of make of her strategy, and what would you be advising her right now to play in this civil war, so to speak?
Well, if I were her, I'd be reminding everybody that it was not so long ago we were talking about Speaker Boehner and we were talking about Speaker Ryan, and the Democrats should not take for granted that the House of Representatives is theirs. Yeah, they didn't win as much as they thought, but they won, and winning is something that was not within reach to them a very short time ago, but Nancy Pelosi managed to deliver the House of Representatives. That is what I'm saying. I'm also more than happy to let them kind of point their guns at each other for a bit and not at me. And, I would be maybe directing their ire a bit more that way subtly. She's going to be speaker again. I have a hard time imagining otherwise. The speaker race that remember when we were all thinking, well, what's going to happen? Is she going to have to make a commitment that she's not going to run again when the Democrats first took the House?
That's right.
Back there. It didn't really materialize. She obviously ended up being pretty strong there. She's only had more time to solidify her position there. I just can't imagine them moving on her at this particular moment. And it would, again, I think it would be a mistake. I'm not even saying that I go back and forth on Nancy Pelosi. Some days I'm just like, yeah, she's pretty awesome. And other days I think, holy cow, Nancy, retire. Get out of here right now, please. But it would be a distraction at this particular moment. Again, we're talking about the first 100 days of the Biden presidency. They just don't need this right now. And there's no obvious heir apparent to her. Like, if one of those two factions then took control, yes, she's a moderate, but she's not necessarily affiliated with kind of that particular wing as strongly. God, it would be a real problem for them. They would have a hard time winning the votes they need to win. They've got a razor thin majority right now in the House.
Yeah, single digits is what it's going to seem like when all things are said and done. And Corey, you seem to be right. It seems like her and her deputies are going to be fine getting back into their positions. The guy who many have been touting, Representative Hakeem Jeffries, as the next speaker, says he does not want it this round. Carter, anything to add to Corey's strategy about how Pelosi should be playing this, right? She does have the risk of being squeezed, as I said, if both factions turn to her as the establishment that did them wrong and didn't, whether it's unify the party or strategically run things the way they should have. How you playing this if you're her?
I think Corey's making my argument for me, and I'm grateful because, basically what he's saying is, there's the risk is minimal in the overall sense of governing the country. There is going to be a Democratic speaker. There probably won't be a drag 'em out fight for the Democratic speaker. But there's going to be a few arguments about which priorities and how those priorities should be met. And I think that no one's offside. There's no one saying we shouldn't do, I think that AOC and the progressive faction is pretty much conceded the field on Medicare for all, for example. And they're going down the track of the Biden health plan. That's been fairly clearly signaled. So I suspect that we're going to see some jockeying for the small pieces of chum around the outside of what this election could bring. But this is just normal back and forths between passionate advocates. And I just don't see it as a particularly big negative.
Carter, sticking with you, let's talk about AOC. What's her plan here? Is picking the fight the right thing? Is going down this path the right thing? Corey mentioned, I believe it was on our other podcast, The Strategist, that she's definitely looking like the leader of the movement. Does she need to do anything to solidify that? Does she keep going down this path? What are you advising AOC right now in this mini civil war that's going on in the Democratic Party?
If I'm working for AOC right now, what I'm asking her is, what's her end game? What does she see herself being in the future? She's very young. She's very talented. And she communicates in a way that most members of Congress have no concept. When she got into this fight with Manchin today, the picture that she posted of her disapproving face over top of Joe Manchin's head was fantastic. Like, the look on her face was exactly perfect. And she had the wherewithal, the capacity to pull that off and put that post up. Like, it was exactly right. And she's really solid. So what does she want to be when she grows up? Cause I don't think she can be president right away. I don't think that she, maybe she could be a senator.
She's literally not old enough to be president.
Right. I mean, so what is it like being the poster child of the progressive movement? If that's what you want to be, then you should keep on the path that you're doing. But if you want to be something bigger, if you want to be something different, then maybe we need to sit down and figure out the best techniques and tactics. And I think really she sees herself as the voice of the progressive movement, and that's fine. She could be a congressperson for decades and carry this this voice, and it would be wonderful. It would be wonderful to see. But if she wants more than that, then I think she needs to start thinking a little bit differently. But I don't mean that as a criticism of what she's doing right now, because I just think that what she's doing right now is brilliant. It's just, I'm not sure that takes her to a different office.
Corey, do you agree with Carter's strategy? Reverse engineer the end game?
Let's just marvel at this right now, and let's give her a lot of credit. A week ago, people were really talking about progressives blew this for the Democrats, and she has really lived that notion that the best defense is a good offense. You know, going straight for the establishment and saying you blew it on some of this digital stuff, and even the fact that it's now seen as these two sides are arguing and who's right, I think is a massive win for her, and it's strategically quite brilliant. She's got, it's interesting because the leader of faction can sometimes have trouble becoming that consensus candidate and winning the day. You see that, sure, all of the time, but even Bernie Sanders is probably a good example. She's a lot more talented, I think, than Bernie Sanders in some ways. And next election, I think if she might actually be old enough to be president next election. She's what, 30, 31? I think
in that ballpark. Yeah.
But I don't think anybody's really saying she's going to be president next election. That would be a very young U.S. president. It would be very exciting, and maybe that's what the Democrats need after a octogenarian president, which is what they'll be coming down from. But I don't know that she needs to figure out what her end game is yet. I get what Carter is saying, and generally that would be my advice to any politician is like do the work back, figure out what you want to be, pull all those pieces together. But that's more when you're a bit more of a blank slate. Like she already has such a clearly defined brand. It would be very hard for her to move off it at this point. And instead, I think it's more about the moment. And is this the right moment? Will 4 years from now be the right moment? Will 8 years from now? Her youth is such an advantage here because there does tend to be a pendulum here with the Democrats from progressive to moderate. And she just needs to pick her time. She needs to keep doing what she's doing. She needs to establish her credibility. Yes, she needs to have coalitions with those people. She's got to remember that there's a bigger party, and ultimately you win as a Democrat, not as a progressive wing of the Democratic Party. And I don't mean progressives can't win, but I mean you've got to consider there's a bigger party here. But it's more about timing, in my opinion.
Corey, you talked about brand, and I want to move it on to the third person I want to talk about, which is Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. So she's someone who now has a very interesting political brand. By the selection of VP, and now our incoming VP in the United States, she seems to be the heir apparent for 2024. She's also been touted by the progressive wing of the Democratic Party as someone they're celebrating, not for the fact of her history of progressive policies, but as their gateway towards getting Joe Biden to move to the left. So if you were her right now, who's got 2024 ambitions, know that the progressives kind of see an ally in you, even if you may not be one, and are going to drag you to the left. How do you kind of navigate this, knowing that very few candidates have actually done well running away from their inextricably linked president or couple? So how do you kind of play this if you're Kamala Harris in the early days, right? Because that's where we are right now. In the early days, what's kind of your compass? How are you navigating this?
It's a baffling theory to me, this notion that you are going to make a prosecutor who is very firm in her own opinions, that you're just going to manage to convince her. Yeah, like you're going to drag her into the worldview you want and pit her against the sitting U.S. president, even subtly. I don't understand the logic of that. And it just seems baffling to me that people think that this is an avenue available to them. She just got that. She doesn't even have the job yet, but she's just going to have the job of vice president. And I have never seen a vice president immediately go to odds with their president. I'm not saying it hasn't happened, but it's barely a real job. I'm sure she's going to have more governing authority than some vice presidents, but the notion that she is somehow going to be the person who is going to change Joe Biden's worldview when her own worldview is arguably not as progressive as that is baffling to me.
Yeah. Carter, same question, but with an additive. Is 2024 on the mind at all if you're advising Kamala Harris? Or are you saying get down, govern, just get this thing done, learn to be president, and we'll make the rest happen after the midterms? Or are you already strategizing about 24 right now?
You have to keep 24 in mind for everything. And to that end, Corey couldn't be more right. I mean, you absolutely must fall in line with the president that you're working for. I can't help but think there's something almost sexist about this idea that we've got Harris on the inside now, and so we'll be able to co-opt her to our progressive ideals. She's not that progressive. She's a moderate. She ran as a moderate. She had her own campaign with her own ideas that people can look at and see what she stood for. And she did not stand with Warren, and she did not stand with Sanders. She stood far closer to the center with Biden. And it almost sounds to me like, oh, we finally got a woman in there. Now we can bend her to our will in a way that we couldn't have bent these male candidates. And it has this kind of, it creeps me out a bit. Like it doesn't ring true. I think that Harris is a exceptionally strong person with her own views and her own viewpoints. And she said to Joe Biden, I am prepared to park these views and viewpoints to become your vice president. And that messaging was sent throughout the entire campaign. So I suspect that we will see Harris be an incredibly supportive, super strong vice presidential candidate who will see possibly an awful lot more airtime than she would have if she wasn't just serving a president who was 200 or 300 years old.
Well, the other thing to keep in mind there is that Harris lost to Joe Biden. Joe Biden has some broad appeal, and I'm sure she wouldn't mind leaving or going into 2024 with that broad appeal if Joe Biden doesn't run again, as I think most of us expect he won't. So and by the way, you know who Joe Biden beat? A lot of those progressives, and it's not as though it seems to me like that's a winning political strategy necessarily, even that you would hew hard to the left and become the darling of the progressive wing, setting yourself up against the moderates who won the nomination and won the presidency. Yeah,
and I may add that there might even be a race element to this as well. Carter, you said a gender element, right? I think there's a race element to say that there's a racialized woman here and we can drag her towards more progressive beliefs. Barack Obama was a black man, but not the most progressive in that 2008 Democratic field, not by a long shot, right? He was outflanked by Edwards and even Clinton to some degree. But the fact is that in that 2008 timeframe, that race gave him a bit of cover towards progressive ideals because it kind of generated excitement. And I think in this case, there is a bit of that going on with Kamala Harris as well, that there's excitement that a woman of color is occupying this role first for both. But that does not mean that she can't hold the positions to what you guys are both saying that have brought her to this political position, and not to be co-opted by what people think she should be, based on perhaps one element of her identity. I want to leave that there and move it on to our final segment, our overrated, underrated. Stephen, are you ready?
Well, I am, and I'm glad you just asked me because Corey has barely been paying attention.
Well, Corey, this first question, Stephen has a conflict of interest, so I'm going to go to you first. Joe Biden has named his chief of staff, Ron Klain, his former chief of staff, vice president, when Joe Biden was vice president with Barack Obama, was his chief of staff then, was the Ebola czar for the White House. So the question to you, Corey, chiefs of staff, overrated or underrated position?
Well,
Rick.
I think they're pretty highly rated, but I will even say underrated. I can tell you, my experience is obviously much more in the Canadian system, but the chief of staff has far more authority than the average cabinet minister. And in the U.S. context, the chief of staff, sits on cabinet. Like that's a powerful position. It is the gatekeeper to the president. It makes the chief of staff, when it's functioning properly, makes the decisions that are not important enough to bring to the president, right? And arranges the information for the president for all of those other ones. So, my God, there is really. It's a much more powerful position than vice president. It's much more powerful than I think people appreciate. There's a reason why people leave being, somebody in the House of Representatives like Rahm Emanuel did, to become the chief of staff. It is a real job. It is a serious job. It is a better job than any political job in the United States besides President of the United States.
Carter, overrated, underrated, chief of staff?
I think it's underrated. It's also, everything that Corey said is exactly right. It's also exhausting. The amount of information, all of those things that the chief of staff has to manage. The chief of staff doesn't get a 4-year term. Most chiefs of staff can't last that long. They get beat up too badly. So I think that this chief of staff, Klain, is the exact right person for this moment. He managed the Ebola response. He understands how to manage COVID, and I suspect that will be his primary responsibility for a couple of years here. And I think it's the right thing. And I was a little disappointed my phone didn't ring, but I'll get through it.
Yeah, you'll get through it. We rarely do book recommendations on this podcast because two of us can't read and one of us doesn't. But Gatekeepers, an excellent book about White House chiefs of staff, just talking about the toll the job takes and the magnitude of the decisions that White House chiefs of staff have to operate. Carter, I'm going to stick with you. We've talked about it. Corey even mentioned it on this podcast. The political moniker of the first 100 days of a president's term, the first 100 days, overrated or underrated in your mind?
I wish it was overrated. I think that it's in fact underrated. I think that, you have a moment, you have a little bit of a window where you can push a lot of things through. And once you get past that, then the grind of politics begins to slow you down. I think I said on this podcast once before, if I were Biden, I would be setting up for 2 100-day periods. Probably, I think I said one before. You have to take advantage of this first 100 days as best you can, which is going to be really hard given that there's not going to be any transition. And I suspect that McConnell's really going to push hard on holding the Republican Senate against anything that you wish to actually achieve. But then there's a second 100 days that comes after the 2022 Senate elections that I would be focused on as well. Because if you can hold the House, a bigger question now than perhaps it was when we started this election process. But if you can hold the House and pick up some more Senate seats, that might actually be Biden's real 100 days where he can actually achieve something.
Corey, first 100 days of presidency, overrated or underrated?
Underrated. I can't believe I'm saying that given the mythology of the first 100 days, but that does tend to be when you are just running on goodwill. Now, whether this is 100 days like previous 100 days really remains to be seen. But generally speaking, you can expect your appointments go more smoothly. Your legislation gets a fair shake, even if it wouldn't normally get a fair shake. This first 100 days may end up being very overrated. But in general, it is a really impactful time for a leader.
Corey, I'm going to stick with you. We've talked about this civil war in the Democratic Party. There's still a bit of one in the Republican Party as well going on between Trumpism, aka what Corey would call populism, and more moderate Republicans. Discord within a political party, overrated or underrated?
Overrated. I think. Well, I guess if you're saying like if like you've got a situation where the party's not getting along, is that a big deal or not?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not as big of a deal as people make it out to be. Political parties naturally have scheming, naturally have mechanics like this that allow people to jump around. And I do believe if you're in the middle of it, it feels much more significant than it looks from Main Street, right? When you look at it, it just kind of looks like politicians be politicianing. And it doesn't have that same Shakespearean element that it does when you are living and breathing these things. So, and also, like, just look at the last 4 years. Look at the Trump administration and all of the chaos and all of the drama and who's up and who's down and who's allowed to see the president, who isn't. And did it change much as far as public perceptions of Donald Trump? I would say no. It's interesting to look at how both parties are dealing with what is fundamentally their moderate wing versus their edges. And And in a funny way, I think that they have the same problem, which also offers some inoculation, Zane. So the last thing I would say on this point is it is really not as big of a deal if it has also happened to your opponent. If you are the only one that's falling apart, it's a much bigger deal.
Carter, the same question to you. Discord within your political party, the hay we make of it, to Corey's point, overrated or underrated?
I think it's completely overrated. It's always fun to watch people who are supposed to be on the same side picking on each other, but it's also how the system is supposed to work. In some regards, it just, it removes some of the partisanship, right? So if we're all against partisanship, if we all think that partisanship is bad, then why are we so fussed when partisans fight a little bit? I just don't think we should be.
Carter, I'm going to stick with you for our final one. We talked about her on this podcast in our previous segment. Nancy Pelosi. Everything she has to bear, everything she has to do, this position that she holds, Speaker of the House, in a now, smaller margin than she's had going into this cycle. Overrated or underrated?
I'm not a big Pelosi fan, if I'm honest. I think that she's overrated. I think that people have her as this giant, visionary who's able to achieve things. I think she just holds the ship together. And I guess there's something to be said for holding the ship together, but I'm just not a particularly big fan of the way she does it.
Corey, how are you?
She lacks vision, in my mind.
Corey, how are you feeling in this hot hit minute? Because you were going both ways in the previous segment. Nancy Pelosi, overrated or underrated?
I think fundamentally she is underrated. I think people discount how much of a leader, how powerful a leader she's been. The very fact that she continues to have such authority within the Democratic Party over, a couple of recent eras, and she's got an iron grip on it, and it's not because she's a fool. She's very canny. She understands how to play the game. She was one of the few people in the past 4 years who could stand up to Trump and looked like she was standing up to Trump and looked tough. And I think people are going to look back on her and say, that was a speaker worth noting. That was like a Tip O'Neill style speaker, one we'll be talking about in 20, 30, 40 years. I just don't get the sense that people realize that at this moment. Love her or hate her, God, she's impactful. She's a really powerful speaker.
We're going to leave it there. That is You the People for this week. My name is Zain Velji. With me, as always, Corey Hogan, Stephen Carter. Make sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you next time.